By definition, it's a term that means unfair. Inequality impacts many different groups and stretches across many different issues, from race to gender.
And so it's a different vibration when you see someone that looks like you working on themselves.
Pay to health. This week we're looking at what's being done to push back against inequality in America. This is The Race. Right now we're heading into a museum that bills itself as the largest collection of racist artifacts in the United States. There are images in this story that will be difficult to look at, and there are many pieces that we just can't show you on television. But the people who are in charge of this museum tell us that by seeing their exhibits with many relics from the past, we can have better conversations about issues of race and inequality today. The elevator ride down to this Michigan College library basement may be quick, but David Pilgrim hopes when you see what's kept here, it will leave a lasting impact.
What we're trying to show people is just the sheer volume of objects that mocked and belittled African Americans.
David is a sociology professor and the founder of the Jim Crow Museum at Ferris State University. For 40 years, he's collected many of the racist items on display here, from symbols of segregation to caricatures that portray negative stereotypes.
I can teach the lessons I want to teach about Jim Crow, about what it was like to be black growing up in that period, and white, and I can do it by objects.
This museum shows the lasting impact of Jim Crow, a name first given to a black-faced caricature performed by white actors meant to belittle African Americans in the 1800s. It became the term used to describe the era of racial segregation that lasted until the 1960s.
In the museum, we use something called visual thinking strategies, which is we ask a person, what is it you see? At one time in the U.S., whipping posts were legal. Black people and poor people were disproportionately whipped on whipping posts. When I ask people what is it they see, which is I could ask you, what is it you see? Almost everybody sees this little boy, right? And they imagine what he's thinking, watching in a public square someone being whipped.
The power of this museum, David says, is in the debates over the everyday items, ones we may all recognize.
We bring together people from, who have different perspectives. So one group of people look at this and they think, these are the vestiges of enslavement and Jim Crow. And then someone else looks at it and just thinks, this just reminds me of good times that I've spent with my grandparents.
One example he gave me was the debate over the Aunt Jemima breakfast brand, retired in 2021. While popular in so many kitchens, according to historians, she was not a real person. Instead, a caricature based on stereotypes dating back to before the Civil War.
It was a marketing ploy, is all it was. And it worked, right? This associating a black woman with wholesome cooking.
Some might dismiss what's on display here as problems of the past. But David says many of these racist items are still being made and sold today.
There's not a single object in this museum that's not being made right now. Some variation of that object is being made right now.
Are you ever surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed.
Emotion, he says, is part of understanding history.
The purpose of studying the past is to better understand the past. Then we can do stuff when we have that deeper and more nuanced understanding. But it's not to make you feel better, not to make you feel worse either. It's to teach and learn what really happened.
The museum has a virtual tour online that allows anyone to experience it. Ferris State is in the process of planning a new facility as the museum's collection has grown far beyond the personal one David started as a teenager.
I believe America could still be that city on the top of the hill, but we're not going to be it if we ignore the lessons that we should learn.
An important message about the future, charted by recognizing the difficult parts of our past.
There's no denying the history 1 mile east of downtown Atlanta. It's the birthplace of Martin Luther King Jr., the home of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Within a mile's walk are testaments to black persistence.
This is our community. Our office is located 2 blocks down from here.
But Luis Negron and many like him work to protect this community today, which on this day means speaking up about the 7-story chasm that now exists. What was your reaction when you heard this hospital was closing?
I was devastated. My heart was devastated for the community to know that they won't have access to health in this area.
We speak on the sidewalk of what was once a hospital. It was first called Georgia Baptist Hospital and most recently Atlanta Medical Center. Now there's no name. The hospital shut down in November, part of what some see as a pattern.
People have been here for generations. With it now being gone, it's going to be a plight in the community of health care and access.
When we are talking about hospital closure, it's mostly rural.
Janani Thapa teaches and studies rural-urban disparities at the University of Georgia. For a decade, the narrative around hospitals shutting down has focused on the nearly 200 since 2005 that have closed in rural areas. But in recent years, hospitals have shut down in Chicago, Philadelphia, D.C., with a similar pattern to Atlanta.
We are a state where we need to do a lot of work in making sure that everyone has equal access to health care.
On August 31st, the nonprofit overseeing Atlanta Medical Center announced plans to cease operations. Wellstar pledged to continue its commitment to the 1.6 million Georgians across our diverse communities. But the communities it vacated in Atlanta and south of the city East Point are largely low-income and black. This isn't an isolated space somewhere.
No, it's not. But I would say the community is very isolated.
When rural hospitals close, residents are often left dozens of miles from the nearest option. In cities, there's at least the illusion of access. Grady Hospital is in the heart of downtown. It's now Atlanta's only Level 1 trauma center.
This was a walkable hospital. So many people will walk here during the day, during the evening. If there was an emergency, they could get here very quickly. Even though we see Grady across the highway in the corner, it's a much more difficult track to get there than this one here.
In November, leaders at Grady declared it isn't going anywhere, but acknowledged an influx of patients in our emergency department and trauma volumes. The future of the former Atlanta Medical Center is unclear. But when it comes to access to health care, it's another reminder of the many issues that affect two communities that rarely communicate. Those miles away from the city and those 1 mile away from downtown.
I think it's a loss in the community. I think it's a lost opportunity.
In Atlanta, I'm Matt Pearl.
Across the country, access to health centers and fitness centers is something hard to come by, which is why black business owners are trying to improve their community by opening these types of businesses up.